Well, good morning, folks. As you make your way in, we'd like to welcome you. My name is Kevin Darty, and I'm with the Illinois Agriculture in the Classroom program. We're excited to have you join us today for our virtual National Agriculture in the Classroom conference. We'll take just a couple minutes for people to get in as we begin, and then we'll get started. Well, again, we'll allow people to come in as they enter, and we are super excited today to welcome you to the National Agriculture in the Classroom virtual conference. Our conference today is being sponsored by the CHS Foundation and BASF. We're grateful to both for their continued support of ag literacy, and we're glad that you can be a part of this. I know some of you were with us a couple of weeks ago back in Utah, and we're excited that you chose to do this. We encourage you to stay for each session, but remember the sessions will be recorded and available on the National Agriculture in the Classroom website at agclassroom.org in a couple of days. Give us to the middle of next week. There are two different tracks today. We will have an elementary tract, and that is this tract, and we'll have a secondary tract, and that is another track. You can use links to flip back and forth between the webinars. During the sessions, listeners will be able to use the Q&A section. You can use the Q&A. I'll be monitoring those, and we will work to relay those questions to the presenter. Please follow up with the National Ag in the Classroom program later this week, as we'll ask for evaluations toward the program. So one of the things that we're going to start off with today is introduce to you. We are so excited to have Jacqueline Briggs Martin as our keynote speaker. Jackie has a brand new book out called Farmer Eva's Green Garden Life. And we actually featured this. It's from Readers to Eaters Publishing. And we actually featured this in Utah. She was there. Some of you might have had a chance for her to sign the book. Jackie grew up in Maine and currently calls her home the Midwest in Iowa. And I'm really excited to introduce you to Jacqueline Briggs Martin. And she's actually joining us on vacation in Maine. So Jackie, welcome. We are super excited to have you here. To begin with, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in Maine this week?
Well, thank you, Kevin. I am so happy to be here. And the first thing I want to say to the teachers who are with us today is thank you. Thank you for all that you do to bring books and kids together. I love telling stories. I love writing books for kids, but I also know that I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be able to meet my goal of getting stories to kids without you. So thank you so much for what you do. Now, for what I am doing in Maine, I am here at my sister's place in Wayne, Maine, which is not too far from Augusta, with my husband and one of our two children, Justin, and his wife and two kids. And we are just vacationing, enjoying the sun and occasionally the water, although it's a little cloudy today, but we have been on the water. So we're having a great time, but I'm so happy to pause that time for a little bit to have a chance to talk about books and stories.
Well, that's great. And you grew up in Maine. So tell us a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up, and how far is Wayne, Maine from where you grew up?
Wayne, Maine is about 20 minutes from where I grew up. I grew up in a town called Turner, Maine, on a dairy farm. And I think that's an important thing for people who read my books to know about me, that I grew up on a farm, because I love writing about the outdoors. I love writing about food and growing food and eating food. Because we had cows that had to be milked morning and night, and my dad was one of the people that had to do it, we never took vacations. We lived 40 miles from the ocean. I thought we lived 200 miles from the ocean because we never went there. our holidays actually were food-based. If it was strawberry season and we had strawberry shortcake, that was a holiday. When potatoes were just coming in from the garden with garden peas, peas and new potatoes was a holiday. So food was so important to my childhood. I find myself wanting to tell food stories.
Well, as you're telling those food stories, you end up in the Midwest. Help me get you from Maine to the middle of Iowa right now.
Oh, it all happens because of marriage, Kevin. I actually, I'll digress for just a bit. I met a man on a Greyhound bus that I ended up marrying. Not shortly after the Greyhound bus. It took us a while to get to know each other. And he teaches English, and he took a job at a college in Iowa. And that's how I ended up in Iowa.
Well, there's a story there somewhere, I'm sure, on a Greyhound bus, for some
Right.
of our students, that idea of a Greyhound bus, that's as foreign as
Yeah.
folding up a map, so
Yeah.
that's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about your new book, Farmer Eva's Green Garden Life. Farmer Eva's Green Garden Life, again, published by Readers to Eaters and illustrated by Christy Hale. Let's talk a little bit about picking this topic and how you came to write the book.
Well, I first learned of Eva from a dear friend of mine who lives next to Eva and said, Jackie, you need to write about my neighbor, Eva Somaripa. And a lot of people say to writers, you need to write a book about this or that. So the first time she said it, I said, yeah, maybe. Then the next time I saw her a year later, she said, you really need to write about Eva Somaripa. And I thought, well, maybe I should meet Eva. And Debbie, my friend, said, you can stay with me while you visit Eva. So I went out to visit Eva and stayed with Debbie. And as soon as I met Eva, I knew Debbie was right. I knew I had to write about her. I went to her place and we walked through her 2.5 acre farm. And she would pull something out of the ground and say, try this. So I would, and we'd walk a little bit further and she would say, try this. She just is passionate about growing tasty greens and herbs and passionate about sharing them and introducing people to new greens and herbs. She's also, I guess that sentence, she's passionate about the greens and herbs and passionate about connecting greens and herbs with people. And I wanted readers to know of this person who didn't start out to become well-known or to become a model farmer. She started out because she loved growing plants. And that love of growing plants got her from this one little place in southeastern Massachusetts to be known all over New England as a farmer who knows how to grow really tasty plants.
So,
and I thought that story of her life, of just doing what she loved, rippled out all over New England to other farmers, to other chefs, to people who eat food, was a good story, an important story.
And your friend talks about her as her neighbor. So sometimes when we think of farms, we think of, big farms, that kind of stuff. What can you tell us about Farmer Eva's farm?
Farmer Eva's farm is less than 3 acres. It's between 2 and 3 acres. She also owns 20 acres of woodland. But in the Midwest, Kevin, because we're both from the Midwest, farms are 1,000 acres. So the idea of supporting yourself from 2 to 3 acres is quite unusual. We are beginning to see in Iowa CSAs that are 3 acres, but really most of the farms where I live are much larger than that. And they have equipment as big as small houses sometimes to work those large farms. Eva has one small tractor, I believe, but she doesn't even use that tractor very much. So it's different. I was trying to think about this the other day, and I thought she's closer to the ground. She's a little bit closer to the ground, I think, than people who have so much more ground to cover.
And in the book itself, not only do you talk about Eva, but there's a lot of really good back matter specifically about the soil and what goes on with the soil. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your understanding and why that was so important for you to put in from Farmer Eva's story?
Well, partly it was important to put in the science about the soil because that's so important to Eva. She really thinks about the soil and how the soil contributes to the flavor of her crops. And as she has progressed in her farming career, she has made a point of learning about the soil and the microbes that are in the soil that contribute to the crops. So I thought it was important in telling Eva's story to tell about what she learned about the soil, but it's kind of a win-win situation because it's important for readers to know that the place where radishes grow is busy with microbes and busy with life. It's not just, we look at the ground and we see brown and we think, okay, that's dirt, nothing going on there. But that's when we miss a lot because there's so much going on there. And the roots and the microbes have this wonderful interaction that they help each other survive and thrive. And I love telling that piece of the story too, that even underground, even where we can't see, there's a network of living things that help each other survive.
That's awesome. And I'll let our participants know you can use the Q&A section. You can use the Q&A section for questions. We'll screen those and get those answered. Myself and Tanya Weibel, who's with the National Ag in the Classroom staff, we can help sort those out. But if you have questions, put those in the Q&A section. The chat feature is disabled on this webinar. But one of the interesting parts that I find, and after talking to you, so you've written this book about Eva, but you're in Iowa and she's in Massachusetts. How many times did you meet with Eva? How many times have you visited? And how much of this is you had to garner from her to put into your words to talk about what she does? Because I've seen interviews with Eva and she gives a great interview, but she doesn't talk really about herself. This is just what she does. Yeah.
I started working on this story before COVID, and I visited her twice before COVID. And then, of course, I didn't visit for a couple of years. I did talk with her on the phone. We had an ongoing email conversation about the story, and I would send her drafts and she would respond. I thought it might be fun as I'm talking about writing the story, just to show
There you go.
a few of the drafts. When I am writing a story, I like to make mock-up, kind of a fake picture book of the story so I can turn the pages and see how it's going to look. Well, I made many. I didn't bring them all, but you can kind of see how many of these picture books I made for the many different versions of this story. Let's see, COVID came in 2020. I went out there before COVID in 2020. The book came out last month. So to write this picture book took 4 years. People sometimes think you can write a picture book in a weekend because it's not that many words, 1,000 words. But when you only have 1,000 words, they have to be the right words. So I visited Eva's farm. I took a lot of pictures. That's another thing I do when I'm writing a story, is I have pictures of the person or the person and the place, and I put them up on my wall. So when I'm in the middle of writing and I think, oh, I hit a block or I don't know what comes next, I kind of can get my head in the space of what I'm writing about by looking at the pictures of Eva's place. So I had that connection with Eva as well. But Eva was very cooperative and very forthcoming. If I ever wrote with a question or anything, she responded quickly. So we did have an ongoing dialogue, even though I only visited her place twice.
I think that's just great to know. And from a teacher perspective, for our teachers, incredible back matter in the back of the book, just wonderful back matter, talking about soil, talking about plants, even a recipe for growing Eva's pea shoots. So lots of information out there. And not only that, a great note from Farmer Eva at the back of the book as well. So a unique twist for your students to see. And again, lots of lessons on the National Ag in the Classroom website or your state Ag in the Classroom website on soil, on plants, on gardens. You know, and Jackie, you talked a little bit about how you've talked about why you think food is important, why you think talking about agriculture is important. Not your first farm book, and one that we've talked about with a lot of comparisons to Farmer Eva, but Farmer Will Allen and the growing table. Let's talk a little bit about Farmer Will and comparisons between Farmer Will and Eva that you might see.
Well, I love Farmer Will. I loved his urban greenhouses. And he probably all the people with us know about Farmer Will, but he had a farm in the city of Milwaukee, just in case you don't know about him, right in the heart of the city. He found 6 greenhouses, bought them, repaired them, and began to grow food in those greenhouses because they were located in a food desert, and he wanted people in that food desert to have something more than Twinkies and potato chips. So I think they have in common that they work with a limited space. They don't have a lot of space. They both work with other people. Eva has interns on her farm. She has other helpers. Farmer Will made a point of employing kids in the area so they would learn about how plants grow. Also, they would learn the structure of work, of a job, that you come every day, you come when you say you're going to be there. So those are some things they have in common. They both believe in the value of nutritious and tasty food. And they both are natural teachers. They want to share what they know with other people. So
again, the idea of Farmer Will Allen and lots of great resources that link back to this on urban greenhouses and classroom gardens. So a trip there. I said I was going to. I kind of gave you an order, but I'm skipping now. Sorry, Jackie. But another one I think we just it pairs so perfectly with this is Alice Waters and Her Trip to Delicious. Another book that folks just need to see. But the comparisons between Eva, Will, and Alice Waters all go hand in hand with trying to teach kids in the public about how to grow your own food. That's how far we've gotten away from that. I think back to your roots and your grandparents and that kind of stuff to where we are today. People don't know how to grow their own food. Tell us a little bit about Alice Waters and the Trip to Delicious.
Well, Alice Waters loves food, just like all the other people we've been talking about. And she's I think we have a picture of her too in the back.
Yep.
She's very committed to fresh food. Here she is. And she started a restaurant in Berkeley, California to make good food for her friends. And the food was so good, the restaurant became famous, and more than her friends wanted to go there. But what she discovered was fresh food is best. And she would drive all over in her car to get fresh fish, or she actually stopped one day and knocked on somebody's door and said, could I pick some, I think it was plums, could I pick some of those plums on your plum tree? She went to great lengths to get the freshest, tastiest food for her restaurant. And then once the restaurant was up and going, in order to get there, she walked past a middle school every day where they didn't have a cafeteria. They had a little food booth out at the end of the parking lot, and the kids would go over there and buy packaged food. And she thought, this is no way for kids to eat. And she eventually convinced the school district to dig up the parking lot and make a garden, a schoolyard garden. That was her first schoolyard garden. And now a huge project of hers is establishing schoolyard gardens around the country and around the world so that kids, as you said, Kevin, know about growing food, know where food comes from, know how to do it, and have that experience of tasting delicious food. I was really impressed, Kevin, when we were in Salt Lake City at the Ag in the Classroom convention, how many of the teachers we met who have schoolyard gardens or are planning to start schoolyard gardens or have a compost in their classroom. It really heartened me, made me happy to think about all those schoolyard gardens.
Well, and again, these books pair right along with that this is not an anomaly. There are things like this going on. And part of our Illinois, our stuff has been on soil the last year. We've just had so much excitement built around students and teachers thinking about really what soil is, what soil is. Now, we had a really good question come through, and I want to throw it out here just a little bit because the question was, if somebody's interested in writing a children's book on farming, what do you suggest they do to start the process? So I know we were going to save some questions, but I think this is a really good question to begin with about what we've got. So what do you think of that?
I always say that writing starts with reading. So I think it's a wonderful idea to write a children's book about farming. We can't have too many of them. I would say go to a good library. If you're a teacher, maybe your school library. Pull out what you can find for children's books on farming. What's out there? See what's been done. See what you love that's been done. And think about that as a mentor text for you. Maybe what you love has a kind of a whimsical tone, or maybe it's written in small sections and you like the idea of writing something in small sections. But find a book you love, see what you can learn from that book. Not just, oh, I like that the dog gets lost and then the dog gets found. Not just what happens, but what kind of language does the writer use? Make a list of the verbs that the writer uses. Make a list of when the scenes change. How does the writer get from morning on the farm to midday on the farm? What happens to get you there? So really take a book apart, take more than one book apart to figure out what the writer is doing. And of course, you have your idea. So think about your idea, what you love about your idea, and how you can convey that idea. And then expect to write your story many times. Remember my stat. I have to show it to you again because this is really important. This is how many times, maybe half of how many times I wrote the Eva story. Kevin and I have been talking about how when you write something, you love it. when you finish writing it, you think, I do anyway, oh, this is the best thing I've ever written. This is amazing. Then I put it aside. I make myself put it aside for a month. I don't look at it, even though I want to, because it's like first love when you first finish writing it. Then after a month, I go back to it and I can see, oh, I need to work more on the beginning, or the ending just kind of drops off. I need to work more on the ending. So be prepared for the long haul. Fall in love with the process of telling your story, not with, I'm going to sell this book and then I'll be able to take a week-long vacation with the money. You have to love the process, because usually it takes a long time to tell a story in the way that you really want to tell it. And if it's a story you love, like with the Eva story, I felt like I had an obligation to the story to do that many drafts, to get it as good as I could get it before I said it was done. So be prepared for the long haul. It won't always be fun, but it will be a lot of fun to find yourself saying things in a way you hadn't expected, in a way that actually really surprises you.
And all of a sudden, what you just described sounds a lot like work, as opposed to I mean, we got the joy. I mean, the book is out, and we had the book opening and the unveiling of the illustrations. But wow, that's a lot of work. I think people, that's one thing that I often, when prospective authors talk to me, they're always, that's a question I get a lot. And I'm like, it's a lot of work, and I love the aspect of picking out good books. You need some good books, check out the National Ag in the Classroom Facebook page. They're posted a book once a week about it. We've got good books about farming out there. What does it look like? What does it look like? Now, you didn't give me the example that we talked about before when I said I knew this question would come up, but you talked about the teenage love. Can you give me that example again?
Yeah, when I was talking with Kevin earlier, I said, me and a manuscript that I've just finished is like when I was 15 years old with my first boyfriend. I thought that boyfriend was the best in the world. I didn't see the geeky hair or the, I don't know, whatever. And that's how it is with the manuscript. When I first finish it, I don't see the weaknesses. I love it. But if I put it aside for a month, I have a more realistic view of it. Just like with that boyfriend, after the first flush of love, I might see, well, I don't know, he doesn't say excuse me after he burps or whatever. It's different. It's different if you don't look at it for a while.
I got a note that said that was a beautiful way of describing the writing process. Thank you for sharing in the nod to school libraries and librarians. That's awesome. Now, I will have to say, I didn't know this before, but then you go and you meet your husband on a Greyhound bus. I am telling you, I can't wait for the autobiography to come out, Jackie. So comparing the two. So we'll also put a plug in. I'm a huge fan of, you don't do this by yourself. You have an editor, and do you have writing buddies that you work with? Or I often tell people, join the local chapter of SCBWI, the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators. So
I totally agree with you, Kevin. I think the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators is a great resource for people who want to be writers for children. And it's not that big of an investment. I think membership might be $80 a year, but what you get is access to articles and access to other writers. I know people have formed online writing groups through SCBWI. You get to go to conferences where you meet editors and you meet other people who want to do what you want to do. You really get to enter the world of children's book writers, and you have so many ways of getting feedback on your own writing if you go to SCBWI. And really, we need feedback. We need to have an idea. We can't just say, well, what do you think I should do about this? But we need someone to give us some guardrails or some guidelines or something to tell us where we need to work on a piece of writing. We still have to do the work on it, but it's nice to have someone tell us the areas where they think we should work. It's like I said, we often cannot see where our own writing weaknesses are.
Well, to go back to Farmer Eva, we talked about that process, but you also have an illustrator. You want to talk a little bit about working with Christy Hale, your illustrator?
Well, you know what's funny, Kevin? Usually the writer and the illustrator do not have a lot of back and forth. I think because the words usually come first, and the writer has a vision in their heads of what it might look like, and editors do not want the writer's vision to impede the illustrator's vision. I love I love everything about her artwork, the three-dimensional of her paper cuts. I love that. I did not imagine that because I'm not a very visual person, but I love it. I did not give her very much feedback during the process. I think she talked with Philip, but this is how it works. There is a lot in the book, in the words about the seasonality of farming. And on a lot of Christie's pages, you see that spiral. And I said to her after the book was done, Christy, I love those spirals that you did. And she said, yes, I got that from the words. So there is an interplay. There's another spiral, even though we don't talk that much. And
That
I think
fascinating. I've read this. I fortunately had a good relationship with Philip, the publisher. I've got other copies, and I just now noticed that. That is so fascinating.
yeah,
So
here's
check
another
out the
page.
spirals in it. Yeah, that is
And
really cool.
It's her reference to the seasons. I was going to say it can be hard for a writer because you do have an idea in your head to see what the illustrator does, because it may not be your idea, but it may actually be better than your idea. So I never say, well, it can't be that way. I don't want that cow to look like that, because an illustrator has their own vision, and I try to leave room for that vision.
That's awesome. And one of the things, just as a teacher thing, one of the things we've talked about in Illinois at some of our teacher trainings, yeah, you have kids write story about what's in their lunch, and they're all vested in their story, and then we often have them draw their own picture. Somebody else. What if they pass it off and the kid behind them has to read it and then illustrate their story? Same
I think
process.
that's a wonderful idea.
Then you see what somebody else takes from your words. I think that's a really cool thing. Now, we're gonna do a fast word play here. We got a couple other, because we're Jacqueline Briggs Martin, Caldecott winner, Jacqueline Briggs Martin. She's written a ton of books. Let's talk about a couple of your others. How about Sandor Katz and the Tiny Wild? Why don't you talk a little bit about Sandor?
Oh, I would love to talk about Sandor. Sandor was a city boy, and he grew up in New York City. Thought he would always be a city boy. But then in the 90s, he realized he was tested, and he realized he was HIV positive. And those of you who have memories of the 90s will remember that that was a terrible thing to find out about yourself. Sandor decided he couldn't live that urban life anymore. It was too fast paced. He wanted a slower paced life where he could pay more attention to how he felt, how his body felt. So he moved to Tennessee, to an off the grid commune in Tennessee, where he was put in charge of the gardens. And when the cabbages were ready, all the cabbages were ready at the same time. And he thought, what am I going to do with all these cabbages? and he remembered eating sauerkraut as a kid. And so he found a crock in the barn, and he made some sauerkraut, and he loved it. And then he added some flavors to it and kind of made a combination of kimchi and sauerkraut. And he loved that too. And he took it to potlucks, and everybody loved it. And he wrote a little zine about making kraut cheese. And then he turned that into a book, and he started going around the country telling people how to ferment vegetables. And he's been doing it ever since. He's gone all over the world telling people how to ferment vegetables. And now, even in my small town grocery store in Iowa, I can find fermented vegetables. And I believe it's because of Sandor Katz. He started this movement of showing people how great these fermented vegetables taste. And it all goes back to Eva, to Farmer Will, to Alice Waters. All these people have such a commitment to good food, to the health benefits of good food, and the flavor of good food, the flavor experience of really good food.
And you got to do a session on Sandor at the national conference with our friend Catherine from Iowa, and actually talked about the whole fermentation process. So
yes, and in the back of this book, this is something teachers can do in their classroom. There are instructions for fermenting vegetables. And depending on the age of your students, you can chop vegetables with students if you have older students. But if you don't, if you're working with second graders, you can just bring in a bag of chopped cabbage and chopped carrots, add some salt, mix it up with your hands, add some seasoning to it, and pack it into a jar. And a few days later, you have fermented cabbage. And you can do it all in your classroom. You can leave that jar. You don't need refrigeration to do fermentation.
yeah.
So, and my co-writer, June Jolie, has been doing fermentation workshops in California. And she said, kids just love squeezing and mixing the cabbage and the salt, that it's really fun for them. So I think that would be a really fun classroom cooking activity. No heat cooking, we call it in the book.
There you go. Also partnered with June Jolie, you did Chef Roy Choi, a unique look at street food, street vendor food. Tell us a little bit about working with June Jo and Chef Roy.
Well, working with June Jo is a lot of fun. I love collaboration. It's two heads are always better than one, or three heads. I've collaborated with two other writers. So that is fun. And we wanted to do this story. He is a food hero, not because he gets his hands in the dirt, although he might, I don't know, but because he brought great flavors out to the street. He put Korean barbecue in a taco and became famous for his street food. And it took him a while to get there. It wasn't a straight line path for Roy Choi. For a long time, he didn't know what he wanted to do. Then he went to cooking school and became a chef. And then 2008 came and he lost his chef job. And he thought he might have to run a tour bus in Los Angeles. But someone said, what about a food truck? So he worked on a flavor of Korean barbecue that he could put in a taco, and his food truck became famous. There were lines around the block. And I want to show you this picture. One thing it did, one thing good food always does, any kind of good food, is it brings people together. And there is a wonderful illustration here of all the different kinds of people in LA that came to Roy's food truck. Strangers talked and laughed as they waited in line. Koreans with Latinos, kids with elders. taggers with geeks. That's what good food always does. It brings us together. And really, in addition to writing about food, community, that's what we're writing about too. That's what we often want to write about.
And I think that makes a unique tie right into classrooms. A classroom becomes a community, just like the community and the food
That's right.
brings together. Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of collaboration, begin with the B. Lots of great pollinator things in here. You collaborated with two other authors, and you only got 1,000 words, so that's 333 words apiece. Man, that has to be tough working with three.
Yeah. Collaboration is so much fun. I'll tell you how it works with me, or it has worked in the books I've collaborated on, is somebody writes a draft to get you started. And then everybody takes a look at it and makes suggestions. And I know there are writers who are participating today. I want to suggest that you try writing something with a friend. But I also want to say, you kind of need to know the person that you want to write with so you can say to each other without hurt feelings, well, I think we could make this a little bit stronger. Or what if we tried this here? It takes two people who are willing to put something out in the middle of the area between you and work on it together. It can't be one of those situations where you think, this is mine. I did this, I love it, and I'm not going to change it. You really have to be willing to put it out in the middle and work on it together.
There you go. And with Lisa Ketchum and Phyllis Root, you have a new book coming out with them on trees, from bees to trees. You want to talk just
From
briefly
bees to
about
trees.
Yeah.
Right. This new one is called The Greenheart Tiny Forest. And it's about a new way of planting trees. Well, relatively new. It was first proposed by a Japanese botanist named Akira Miyawaki. And he figured out from looking at the trees in Japanese shrines that grow very close together that you could plant native trees very close together if you dig out the soil where you want to plant and you replace it with compost, and you choose native trees of varying heights. So you have some canopy trees and then some somewhat shorter trees, and then some maybe lower trees like native mulberries, and then brush, some brushy plants, and down on the ground, some herby plants. You can plant them like 5 to a square meter, and you tend them, weed them and water them for the first 2 years. Then they grow themselves. They don't need tending. And after 20 years, they are like a mature forest. They are as tall as a mature forest. And the soil underneath the plants, Kevin, is like the soil in a mature forest. It has all those microbes, all of those fungal threads that a mature forest has.
So
isn't that remarkable?
It is, and I'm looking forward to that with our Arbor Day material and how important it is on trees. So
Yeah.
As we sum up, I just have to mention, if folks don't know, the water gift and the pig of the pig. I've shared with Jackie. This is about witching for water, or divining rods. My dad actually can do this, so it always freaked out my college friends. But the importance of water, just another great Jacqueline Briggs Martin book. So real quick, if you got a quick story on that?
I love this book. This book is set in Maine. My parents had a friend, and she was a friend of our whole family, whose parents had died. She was raised by her grandparents. And I always wondered what that would be like. So that was one of the threads of the story. And then when I was doing research for another book that I never wrote, I read an article about water dowsing, water witching. And it seemed so interesting to me and so mysterious that I wanted to write about it. And I don't think anybody knows why it works, do they, Kevin? Do you?
Yeah, I've got nothing, but it's
Yeah,
fascinating. If
it
if
is
you see it,
fascinating.
you see it.
I don't know
And
if you can see that picture of the
yep.
character in the book with the stick, but that's how they do it. They take that stick and walk across the field, and when they're over underground water, the stick points down.
Yeah. So my dad does it with two metal rods and does the
Yeah.
same thing. But Jackie, we would be remiss. Again, the fanboy in me, and with a Caldecott Award winner, I can't not mention Snowflake Bentley. Again, the weather, the water, the bees, the food, it all works together. But tell us just a brief bit about Snowflake Bentley.
Well, I did not know about Snowflake Bentley when I was growing up. I didn't learn about him until our kids were 4 years old and 7 years old. They got a magazine called Cricket Magazine, and there was an article in one February issue in 1979 about Wilson Bentley. And once we read about him, I never forgot him because he lived on a farm in Vermont and I grew up on a farm in Maine. I knew what it would be like to walk into Wilson Bentley's barn. I could smell it. And I knew what his life was like on the farm because I had lived that life. And to think that he had that life too, but he took 5,000 pictures of snowflakes in the same kind of place where I grew up was just kind of mind blowing to me. And I was fascinated by him. And every time it snowed, when our kids were growing up, I would say, wouldn't Wilson Bentley love this day? Finally, when they were college age, I said that. We were out walking, and they said, Mom, why don't you write about Snowflake Bentley? I think they were tired of hearing me say that. So I thought, yeah, why don't I? I had written a few books by then. I thought I had not done any nonfiction, but I thought, yeah, I should do that. So that was really the impetus for the book. I loved him, and my kids gave me the suggestion to write about him.
Well, from Snowflake Bentley and the books before up to Farmer Eva, and Farmer Eva was just released during the National Ag in the Classroom Conference at the end of June. Things are going great, but you've got a big event coming up in just a week or so. Lucky you're in Maine, you can just drive right down. Tell us
I
what you got going
know.
on next week.
I am so excited about this. If anybody in this group is from Massachusetts and can get to Dartmouth, Massachusetts on July 30th, we are having a party for Farmer Eva at Dayball's store in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Eva's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Eva's going to talk about her farm. I'm going to talk about writing the story and maybe read the story. There'll be food. There'll be books. I think we'll have a great time. I'm really looking forward to it. So I want to invite everybody, July 30th, 5 p.m., Dayball's Bookstore in Dartmouth, Massachusetts.
There you go. Farmer Eva's author. Jackie, it has been such a pleasure getting to talk with you. Got to know Jackie during the build up to the National Ag in the Classroom Conference. And folks, if you are anywhere close to Dartmouth or you can figure out how to get there, go and meet her in person. You won't be disappointed. Jackie, thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. Good luck with the book, and we can't wait to see what's next. We're excited about trees already. So with that, folks,
thank you, Kevin,
for joining us. Thank you, Jackie. Again, the National Ag in the Classroom Conference. We had a question. I'm going to ask Tanya to jump on and see if she can help me post with this. This is going to be the elementary track. There is a secondary track, and it'll start at the top of the hour, so we'll have that coming on. She just posted that. We have it. And now I'm going to try and figure out how to post the evaluation. You will be getting an evaluation from Jotform. Please fill that out. But again, thanks again to Jacqueline Briggs Martin, the author of the newly released Farmer Eva. Farmer Eva's Green Garden Life. You can't go wrong. You need this for your classroom for next year. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. We'll start again at the top of the hour, folks. Again, this is the National Ag in the Classroom virtual conference sponsored by both CHS and BASF. We'll be back real soon. Thank you.